Like, say about Illumination what you may, they are by no means saints or the most respectable animation company out there for all it's worth. They have an identity in producing harmless, character-driven kids films that no one will ever likely put on any top 10, but still have a fixed audience that knows what they're going in for.
This is the studio in which is well known to go and play it safe. They're not there to go and make amazing animated features. They want to go and make movies that people want to go and see. Like, they are aware of what people want to go and watch with their films like The Minions or Despicable Me or Sing or The Secret Life of Pets, and they would go and deliver what people want, especially when it would go and become some of the most successful animated features in recent years.
Hello everyone, welcome back to John Bell Reviews. Now before I get into this, I would like to make an apology because unlike the previous two movies I reviewed, that being Sing 2 and Puss in Boots The Last Wish, this one will not be an early movie review as there weren't any access in my country. So I apologize in advance for that. But anyway, back onto the main subject. It seemed that Illumination has had a pretty successful year since 2016 with two films they put out. And while these films haven't had a chance to bring critics down the house quite yet, they were pretty much more successful at the box office, with their first billion-dollar hit since Despicable Me 3, the Super Mario Bros. Movie. And their next output, it would be something different, an original film since the first Sing with Migration. Now, from this film alone, there isn't really much about it, like it's just a movie with ducks in it, but the main selling point is that it has a French animator named Benjamin Renner, who you may have known as one of the directors of the beloved independent animated film Ernest and Celestine. So with him being the actual first outsider for the company instead of Garth Jennings in the aforementioned Sing, this collaboration between a French auteur and a mainstream company were working together to give a more Hollywood touch to Renner's work. It's quite interesting since it's like an Irish studio like Cartoon Saloon and a mainstream streaming service like Netflix combined when they put their output, My Father's Dragon, which turned out to be fine, but also one of their weaker works. How does this do for me? Well, let me see what this has to offer. So, the story, there really isn't much to talk about. It's just like your typical road trip story. But only the catch is that it takes place in the sky instead of on the road. You know, like highway in the sky, you might say. It's basically just the characters going to point A to point B. You know, these kinds of stories. But what kind of positives can I just give this film? Well, allow me to bring up an animated film from Netflix titled Duck Duck Goose. You know, with Jim Gaffigan, Zendaya, and the late Carl Renner. How does this compare to Migration in terms of what it did right? Well, for one thing, the humor. Unlike Duck Duck Goose, where it's mostly a bunch of bottom of the barrel humor, this film is much more tame compared to what we have, and especially from Illumination films. Like, there's a minimal use of toilet humor and minimal slapstick comedy, you know, for the kiddies to enjoy. So that's one thing that this does right compared to Duck Duck Goose. And another thing that this film does right is the theme of family. Like, it's a good time to spend time with your family, but also explore new things even if you want to stay where you are, like in your comfort zone. It's okay to enjoy an adventurous life as well. However, personally, my biggest criticism is that this film felt way too short, and I wish they could expand upon some things that this film offered, which I'll talk about when I get to the characters. That's probably my only gripe. And not to hide the fact that this has similarities to Pixar's Finding Nemo and Blue Sky's Rio in the other aspects, which I'll get into. But the return of John Powell, his first Illumination film to score since the 2012 The Lorax, is absolutely beautiful to listen to in the ears, as it can get you immersed in this film for the most part. While this film is your generic road trip story, it does have elements that did better than Netflix Duck Duck Goose, on top with a beautiful, breathtaking score by John Powell. Now for the animation, this is where Benjamin Renner's style would come in, as he would go from traditional animation to computer animation, something like what Pixar's Brad Bird did when he did Warner Bros. The Iron Giant to The Incredibles. Anyway, what do the visuals have to give? Well, it does contain the typical Illumination human figures that you will find in all their works. The cartoony style on the characters, they almost seem like compared to like The Secret Life of Pets in terms of the animals, but these, they are very pleasing to the eyes in the photorealistic stuff. The highlights for me personally are the backgrounds. Yes, while it does go from point A to point B, like there's like the generic New York City, there's also some beautiful locales to admire, like from the New England pond to a swamp, which can be a bit eerie at times, all the way to a water park like place where white birds can enjoy, or doves can relax in, all the way to Jamaica, which almost feels like something that come out of Rio, like in Rio de Janeiro. But all in all, the visuals, what I love about them is that they almost feel like a living painting in terms of like the colors of the trees, which almost feel like they came out from a painting in front of the computer animated world, like matte paintings. And I thought it was admirable to look into. So while the story can't offer much, the animation is such a beautiful highlight, especially when it has a bit of watercolor touches from Renner's style. Now on to the characters. Well, for the most part, there's no escaping the similarities to Finding Nemo as well, especially when it comes to the Mallards. Starting off with Mac, he's the overprotective father, while his son Dax is the teenager who wants to be more adventurous. To me, it almost feel like it blatantly borrows elements from Finding Nemo in terms of Marlin and Nemo's father and son relationship. But on the plus side, we have Pam, who is optimistic about exploring new territories. And for me, while I did criticize the Finding Nemo comparisons, one thing I can also give credit is that Pam kind of represents what Coral would have been before she got killed by Barracuda, if you know what I mean. As for their daughter Gwen, she's like a baby duckling version of Agnes in the Despicable Me franchise. And Uncle Dan, while he is the grumpy grandfather of the Mallards, his voice actor, Danny DeVito, his first voice acting role in an Illumination film since the aforementioned Lorax, he does bring out some good laughs in this film. As for the side characters that aid the Mallards, or, you know, they don't really do much this film, as they only have a few minutes of screen time. Like, Erin is the heron who lives in the swamp that seem like she can eat ducks, but she's actually not. Chomp, voiced by Awkwafina, is the New York pigeon who helps the Mallards get around to the city. And Gugu is the yoga dove who resides in the barn-like water park. There is Delroy with a Jamaican accent by Keegan-Michael Key. He can bring out some fun moments into this film. The chef is the main antagonist, while he does look like a weak villain. What I do admire for the most part is that he doesn't talk like most of the humans do in the world, like compared to the animals they know about. That's one thing I do. It can be a nice idea, but it might have been fun if they didn't have the villain in. And speaking of which, one criticism I have with the short running time is that there were some moments that could have been expanded upon with the other characters in terms of their dynamics. Like with Dax, like in his brief relationship with another family ducks in terms of daughter. I wish they could have done more, like getting to know each other, as well as Gwen getting used to her. And for Uncle Dan and Delroy, they do provide some admittedly fun moments that could say they're LGBT vibe ones, if you know what I mean. And the relationship between Mac and Dax could have worked out better if these elements weren't borrowed from another film. As well as the voice acting, while they also did a fine job, Elizabeth Banks and Danny DeVito and Awkwafina and Keegan-Michael Key are prominent ones, especially with the former. And she does add another Illumination Lego Movie connection. What was that? There isn't much to know about the characters with a few exceptions, for the most part. So overall, what do I think of Illumination Migration? I say it was fine. That's all I can sum up this film. It was fine. Like, while the story is way too short and generic, on top with characters being a bit flat for the most part, the animation, the score, and the voice acting with a few characters make this film all the more enjoyable to look into. So, as for this film capping off this year of 2023, it's not really their best work, but I say you could give it a watch to say you at least seen it once. Also, before this film could begin, there's a short film titled Mooned, which is about Vector trying to get off the moon. And I thought it was just fine, just like the movie itself. To give my quick rating, I'm giving it a 7 out of 10 for being a fine film. As for the movie itself, it also gets a 7 out of 10 for being a fine film. It could have done better, but I'd say it's probably one of Illumination's weaker works, and felt it had wasted potential, like with the Secret Life of Pets 2. But it doesn't hurt to watch. This is all I got for all the theatrically released animated films of this year. Join me next time, and I'll have my ranking out as soon as I can. Take care.